Welcome to our Doo Wop Journey. Hi, I'm Rob Albanese, President of Lahr Enterprises. Producer and promoter of Doo Wop music throughout the United States. Let me introduce you to our host for our journey, Mr. Cool Bobby B from Sirius XM Radio, 50s on 5.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to our amazing journey through the world of doo wop music. Today we're going to feature a very special presentation with some great songs and an in-depth interview with Herb Cox of the Cleftones.
Oh, little girl of mine, gee, you sure look fine. Yes, you appeal to me. I'll never set you free. Be my loving baby till the end of time. I can't seem to get you off of my mind. The boys all roll their eyes as we go strolling by. It's not so hard to see that they all believe me. 'Cause you're my loving baby, you belong to me. That's the way it was meant to be. Oh well, now I know I love you so. I'll never let you go. I need your love, oh so much, that I'm ready to your touch. A demonstration of 50s dancing. Oh well, now I know I love you so. I'll never let you go. I need your love, oh so much, that I crave to your touch. So little girl, stay true. That's all I ask of you. Be mine and mine, don't lose your happy home. 'Cause I love you, baby, and I always will. You're my one and only thrill. My baby, oh honey, oh yeah. Everybody, come on, rock.
Now, recently, I sat down with my old friend Herb Cox, the original lead singer and originator of the Cleftones, for a series of questions about the Cleftones' career. And I asked Herb, how did the Cleftones form?
Well, the way that the Cleftones form, it reads a little bit like one of those B movies we used to see a long time ago with Mickey Rooney. Actually, we formed while we were students in high school, not too unlike many of the other groups of the day, but we formed not on purpose, but we were working on a school election campaign. I was painting scenery, and they asked if we could put together a group of guys who could do jingles for the school election campaign. And since it meant we could stay out of class, I joined that group, and sure enough, there were the future member of the Cleftones there.
How and where did you meet George Goldner?
Well, we had, the Cleftones had been seeking auditions and going to various record companies in Manhattan. And we went over to what was then called Tico Rama Records. And was over on the west side of Manhattan. not a very polished area, first of all. And downstairs there was a police athletic league, and right next door there was a gentleman stacking up cartons of what I presume to be records. He had no jacket on, a bright flashy tie, his shirt sleeves rolled up, smoking a little stogie of a cigar, and we walked in, interrupted him stacking up the records. We said, excuse me, we're looking for Mr. Goldner. And he says, who are you guys anyway? He says, well, we're the Cleftones. He said, go up that flight of stairs just to the left of this door. So we went up the flight of stairs, knocked on the door for about 5 minutes. No one answered. Knocked again, and finally we heard a voice that said, come in. We opened the door. There was the same guy with his jacket on, says, I'm George Goldner.
Herb, you and the Cleftones were one of the first groups in the Goldner stable. Now, do you remember when the Teenagers, the Imperials, or the Chantels, etc., came along? And was there a feeling of camaraderie and togetherness there, like there was at Motown?
Well, you know, the early days of with George Goldner, first of all, we were the very first group to record on the New G label. We had the very first record. The Teenagers were the second record. I remember the Teenagers vividly because we were in the office with George Goldner, and the Teenagers came in with a gentleman who brought them in to audition. And I remember them vividly as they came in, particularly the stark difference between Frankie and Sherman. They appeared, you know, almost like a Mutt and Jeff, but they sounded great, and of course Herman and the other guys. The person who I remember more in the sense of family with the record company was in fact Richard Barrett, who was a member of the Valentines, but Richie was influential with all of the groups, to my knowledge. Certainly Richie had told me about the Chantels before I met them. And he had also told me a lot about the Imperials before I'd actually met those fellas. But in terms of a Motown, I didn't have that sense. We sort of operated on our own, and we knew about our stablemates, but with the exception of the Teenagers, whom we toured an awful lot with, and then later the Chantels, who we worked at the Apollo Theater with, there wasn't that sense of togetherness, I think, that the Motown era had.
As a rhythm and blues or rock and roll vocal group, you toured and performed with non-rock acts like Della Reese, Al Hibbler, saxophonist Illinois Jacquette, and our old friend Harold Cromer of Stumpin' Stumpy, and many others. Did you learn anything from the old pros?
Well, yes. You couldn't help but learn from the old pros. One of the most vivid memories I have is on a tour in 1956 with Della Reese, and this is before Della was the star she's certainly become today. And frankly, Della was a little bit out of place. The audiences where we were touring wanted to hear rock and roll, and Della Reese was a pop jazz singer, I'd say, and she wasn't doing what the audience really expected. They wanted the hard rock or the rhythm and blues rock and roll, and that's not what she was doing. And I watched Della many nights come off the stage in tears, but she kept her head high every night, went out and did her thing, and I learned that you have to persevere and you have to do what's best for you to do, and I think it stood her in good stead. Al Hibbler was a classic, great performer, I think vastly overlooked in today's society. He was not a good performer, a great performer. The same thing could be said for Roy Hamilton and many others like that. Yes, you learn a lot if you watch the pros because they have all the experience in the world that you can benefit from.
Herb, you and the Cleftones went on the road when you were very, very young. Any of those older performers take you under their wing and showed you the ropes, became like a mentor to you?
Well, there were a lot of people who were very nice to us, but there were 3 people in particular that I recall who really were sort of mentors to us. One person I'll never forget was Laverne Baker. When we were kids, Laverne was already an established star, and she didn't even know our names. She used to call us Skinny 1 and Skinny 2 because we were all skinny kids. But Laverne was very nice to us for a star of her magnitude at that time to take time and explain to us. She took me aside one day and said, you know what, you don't know how to bow when you finish on stage. And she showed me how to bow. I really didn't know. And she told me why and when to leave the stage and when not to. But she took a lot of time that she didn't have to. Another person who was very instrumental in our career and served as a mentor was Bobby Lewis. I call Bobby my show business father, because the very first show we did was in Detroit, Michigan. We went out to Detroit, my first airplane trip to Detroit. We had no idea what to expect. We were at the Fox Theater in Detroit with a show of veterans on. on the rest of the bill. We were totally unprepared. But Bobby helped us. We didn't even have our musical charts with us. Somehow, the record company was to have sent our music charts. They got lost. Bobby and Bob Crew, who later became the great producer, Bob Crew, took the time to sit down with Maurice King, the Maurice King, who went on to be the big musical director at Motown, and they worked through our charts. And since that time, Bobby said, look, I'll always be around. As long as you guys are out here, I'll be your show business daddy. And we took that seriously, and I count Bobby among my best friends to this very day.
This is a song we recorded in 1960-61. It makes a very simple but eloquent statement. The song says simply this. I love you for sentimental reasons, and I hope that you believe in me. I've given you my heart. Yes, and I love you. And you alone were meant for me. So please give your loving heart to me and say we'll never part. I think of you every morning, dream of you every night. Oh, my darling, I'm never, never, ever lonely. Yes, and I love you. For sentimental reasons, and I hope that you believe in me and say we'll never part. No, no, we'll never. Oh, my darling, we'll never. And no, no. Thank you.
I hope you're enjoying our amazing journey through the world of doo-wop music. I'm Cool Bobby B from Sirius XM and the 50s on 5. Join me every Sunday night from 9 to midnight with the doo-wop stop. And you want to find out about all the great, incredible live doo-wop performances that LAR Enterprises is bringing to you all over the world in the United States, there's one place to go, and that's the website. It's LARENTR.com. That's www.LARENTR.com. For LAR Enterprises, or just Google it, LAR Enterprises, and get all the info. Rob and Laura do an incredible job of bringing this incredible music to wherever you are. So come see us at one of our amazing live concerts. Just go to our website for the latest live concert information. It's LARENTR.com.
But now back with my talk with Herb Cox. And I asked Herb, as a youngster, you performed at some of the best venues of the era, the Paramount and the world-famous Apollo Theater. But as a youngster, Did you see many of the shows there?
Well, I was born in Ohio, and as a kid growing up in Ohio, I had heard a lot about the Apollo Theater. So when I came to New York, one of the first things I wanted to do was go to the Apollo Theater. And my mother, my father, my aunt took me to the Apollo Theater one night, and I didn't know quite what to expect because I was about 11 years old. But I saw a group, and the image is still so crystal clear in my mind. They walked out on the stage. They had on cream-colored white pants, a light blue jacket, light blue suede shoes with a gold buckle. And I was completely impressed because everybody cheered before they opened their mouth. And the group that I was seeing was Billy Ward and the Dominoes. And they were terrific. And I remember looking to my mother and said, "Mom, that's what I want to do."
Herb, now, I've got to ask you this. As I look at your record labels, I see that your name is not alone. How did it come about that you shared writer's credits with George Goldner and subsequently Morris Levy?
That is a terrifically delicate question, the way it's phrased. How did I get to share the writing credits? Let me repose the question a little bit. The question really is, in my case, and I'm sure in the case of many of the other artists where their names appeared, the question is, how did they get their name on my work? That's really the question. And it's part and parcel of what was going on in that time, but it still isn't correct. They took advantage of young people who didn't have experience, who didn't have the education, who were complete novices in the business, and really they just added their name, or in some cases took complete credit for writing material or producing things that other people had done. And George Goldner's name originally appeared on Little Girl of Mine. George didn't write anything. I wrote the entire song myself with the help of my group, and he had absolutely nothing to do with it. But it was part of the way business was done in those days. It was exploitation, frankly.
You know, it seems to me that no act appeared on more of Alan Freed's live stage shows than the Cleftones. What was your relationship with Freed?
Well, the Brooklyn Paramount has a lot of special memories, but that's another theater that I'd gone to the theater. I saw the shows before we were ever on the show, and I was really impressed, and I was another fan in the audience, and I saw all the great rhythm and blues group that I admired, like you know, the Flamingos and of course the Moonglows and many others. But our relationship with Alan Freed was very, very good, and I thought very unique. We were on a first-name basis with him. We did not only his shows that people remember in the Brooklyn Paramount, but we did a lot of his shows up at the State Theater in Hartford, and we did his radio show. He had a radio show early on. We did that 2 or 3 times. He called us the bouncing Cleftones because we weren't great dancers, but we used to jump around on stage a lot. We had a very good relationship with Alan.
Herb, in the early days, you worked with many of the early pioneers and legends of rock like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Laverne Baker, whom you mentioned, Bill Haley, Fats Domino, etc. What were they like?
1956, 57, from touring all around the country, from watching all the artists that I saw, and watching all of the other artists who would come into the audience to see the show of a particular performer. To me, the most dynamic performer by far in the early days was Little Richard. There was nothing like him. He could back up his hits with an outstanding show. He was a little unpredictable, and he was certainly different. And I never saw an audience move to a frenzy the way Little Richard could in the early days.
You know, by the late 1950s, things had started to slow down for the Cleftones before you enjoyed a resurgence in 1961. Now, did you ever think about giving up the business?
Well, yeah, in the latter part of the 50s, things did slow up a little bit. And yeah, I thought about it. In fact, I went back to school. I went back to college for a little while, but we continued to try to write songs and stay together. We had a brief hiatus. Since 1956, right up to today, there's never been a year where the Cleftones didn't perform. But things were slowing up a little bit, and I considered not performing anymore. But we were fortunate enough to have another hit record in 57, 58 called Why Do You Do Me Like You Do. It wasn't a big hit, but it was enough to make the charts, and that encouraged us, and we were back out on the road before we knew it.
Herb, you appeared on the first ever oldies or revival show with Alan Fredericks of WADO Radio at the Apollo Theater in the summer of 1961. And I must tell you, I was in the audience for that show. Now, what do you remember about that show, and was it
Golden oldies.
odd to be considered an oldie but goodie when the cast of the show was still in their early 20s, or in the case of the Bobettes, still in their teens?
I remember that show very well. Among other acts, the Cadillacs were on that show, and I believe the Solitaires. It was a terrific show, and we loved working at the Apollo. We'd worked at the Apollo as many as 8 or 9 times in a year, years previous to that. So it was good to come back home to the Apollo, particularly since there had been some talk about closing the theater, etc. I don't think I was offended by the term old goldies at the time, although I wondered why, you know, they had to choose a terminology like oldies. You know, if you went to see some jazz performer who had been legendary 20 or 30 years before, they didn't call their music oldies, it was just jazz. And to this day, I sort of like to call the music that we represent classic rhythm and blues or classic rock and roll, as opposed to oldies, and certainly not doo-wop.
Herb, tell me the story about the show you did in Roosevelt Stadium in Jersey City, New Jersey, where for some unexplained reason you were paid off not in currency.
I have to preface this story by saying that there came a point in our career where we became disenchanted with our management and with our booking agent. And we decided that we didn't need a manager and we didn't need a booking agent, and we could do it all up by ourselves on our own. So we started out we thought it would be easy. We would tell people to call us up, and we would do a lot of shows that way. Well, it really wasn't happening. No one was calling us up. We didn't really know how to go about managing ourselves. We were about 19 or 20 years old at the time. And there was a fella, his name was Izzy Grove. Izzy was a character along the Brill building in Broadway. He was the kind of guy, I know you know the kind of guy I mean, and you'd meet him, he was always fixing his collar. Hey, how you doing, guys? Everything all right, fellas? I haven't seen you in a long time. And no matter what you would say in response to him, he'd say, yeah, fine, that's good. If you said, hey, my mom just died, he'd say, yeah, fine, that's good, man. Which meant he wasn't really listening to you, and he was pretty insincere. And he was always a character. He always had a big deal going on. Well, one day we ran into Izzy Grove in front of the Brill building. He said, hey, what are you guys doing? What are the Cleftones doing? We said, well, we're managing ourselves. He says, I'm having a big show at Roosevelt Stadium in New Jersey. I'm going to have 25,000 people there. He said, would you like to be on the show? And we said, well, sure. When is it going to be? And it was relatively soon, like 5, 6 weeks away. We said, sure. And there were about 5 or 6 other acts on the show. We discussed a price and a fee. He agreed. He says, I'll send you a contract and I'll send you an advance right away. Well, that happened, but we got no contract. We saw no advance, and we were down to like 2 weeks from the show. And more disturbing, we hadn't seen any advertising about the show at all, nothing whatsoever. And we called Izzy, said, Izzy, what's going on? We don't know anything. You know, nobody seems to know about the show. He said, don't worry, don't worry. I sold a lot of tickets. It's going to work great. Fine, fine, fine. Well, he didn't send us in advance. We were very concerned, but by this time we were committed to the date. So we said, well, let's go to the show that night and let's see what happens. So we went over to New Jersey, Roosevelt Stadium. I remember that Brooklyn Dodgers played there for a little while, so I knew where it was. We get over there, and we were early, but there were about 6 cars in this vast parking lot. Nothing, no activity, except for these bakery trucks that were coming in and out, going underneath the stadium, about 4 or 5 bakery trucks back and forth. And Izzy was involved in some kind of dispute with the guys in this bakery truck. So we said, Izzy, what's happening with the show? He said, don't worry, everything is fine. We said, well, where is our money? He said, hey, fellas, don't worry. I have the money. Everything is going to be fine. We were in the position where we were going to walk out. We get up right up to showtime, and we had said, we're not going on unless we have money. Well, he still hadn't paid us, and he conned us again. Come on, fellas, as soon as you go on, I'll pay you. There were maybe 200-300 people in this stadium that could hold 25,000. It was a complete disaster of a promotion. So we went out, band was there, we did our thing, did our 15, 20 minutes on stage, and it was tough to do a show in those circumstances, but we did it, and we came off. When we came off, we almost collared Izzy. He says, okay, where is our money? That's it. We've been on, we've done the whole thing. He said, wait a minute, take it easy, come with me. He takes us downstairs, underneath in the catacombs of the stadium, and there's a big empty room there, except in the corner there's about 80 boxes of things stacked up against the wall. He says, You guys saw what happened out there tonight. You guys didn't draw anybody. What the hell do you mean we didn't draw anybody? He said, look, I'm going to make good with the money, but for the time being, what I'm going to do is, you see those boxes over there? He says, I want you guys to take anything you want. But what is this? So we go and we look at the boxes. They're all pies. They're pastry. You know, apple pie, peach pie, cherry pie. He said, are you crazy? Are you trying to pay us off in pies? Is that what you're trying to do? He said, well, that's just temporary. I'll get the money to you. Take whatever you want. So this is no way. I can't do this. You know, so we said, give us 10 minutes to talk about it. Because we were considering, do we try to break his legs or do we take these pies? What do we do? We've already performed. We were looking like fools to ourselves. So we said, well, you know, we can't attack the man. He's gonna either pay us or not. So we may as well take some of these pies and go. So I walked over to the other wall there, and there's some real fancy pies, custard pies. I said, yeah, I'm gonna take some. He says, don't touch those. He never paid us, by the way.
Herb Cox, how would you like the Cleftones to be remembered?
That is a tough question. One of the things that I will say, though, and I don't want this to sound too pompous, I don't mean it to come off that way, I'm very proud of the Cleftones because all of the people that performed in the Cleftones, I think, were people who tried to comport themselves as gentlemen and as ladies and to be good people and to be credits to whatever we did. Musically, I think the Cleftones have a unique importance along with just 2 or 3 other acts. People often ask me, what's the difference between rhythm and blues and rock and roll in those days? It seemed to be over, you know, they sort of blend together. What was the difference? I think the Cleftones were one of the groups that were right at the doorway. There's a difference between rhythm and blues and rock and roll, and I think that when the artists became young and they were artists who appealed to all ethnic groups, blacks and whites, that was really the birth of rock and roll out of rhythm and blues, where an artist would have equal a number of fans and, more importantly, young fans. And the Cleftones, the Teenagers, the Penguins, the Chantels, those were acts that were right at that doorway who had young fans of all ethnic groups. So I'd like the Cleftones to be remembered as one of those in that number.
I got to thank you, Rob. That was a fantastic show.
Yes, it was, Bobby, and I'm so glad we have the opportunity to bring this great music, this doo-wop journey, to everybody. Hope to see you all at the next show.